So it's our great pleasure to have you with us, Idil, today. And now the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the introduction, and also thank you for inviting me to speak in this webinar. First of all, I would like to maybe say a couple of words before I move on to my presentation. So thank you, all of you who is, putting in voluntary labor in organizing NEST and NEST webinars. Why I'm saying this, well, obvious, but also I remember my own doctoral researcher years, which ended a good 11 years ago. And being in New Zealand, geographically isolated, but also technologies were not as advanced at the time. And the research communities on sustainable transformations and transitions were just emerging. So it was very isolating to do the research that I did. And I have heard of NEST after I just finished, I think, being an early career researcher, and I was pretty jealous. So I think everyone who has access to NEST, who has access to NEST's webinars and all of the other activities, you are very, very lucky. But moving on from that, so yes, my name is Idil Gaziulusoy, and I'm just filling in as I try to find the share share button. Yes, here. And I am a associate professor of sustainable design in Aalto University. I'm also leading NODU's sustainable design research group. And I prepared like a 30 to 40 minute presentation for you. And I'm going to skip the parts that I believe will be very kind of well known for the audience, but just bear in mind that I do give this I do give presentations on this topic to many different audiences. So some parts of it might be very, very basic for you, but there are audiences who still need to be kind of, brought to the same ground before being able to start talking about other things in the presentation. So a bit more about me, and this is more like both, yes, get to know me a bit better, but also a positionality statement, so that you know my background, and then you can situate, my presentation in that context, because obviously, as any inter/transdisciplinary researcher, what I know is pretty limited, and so in the vast ocean of disciplinary and interdisciplinary knowledges relevant to sustainable transitions and transformations. I am a disciplinary and geographic adventurer. I had not planned to become one, but I did eventually become one. So I'm originally from Turkey, and that's where I got my bachelor's in engineering and then my master's in industrial design. And during that master's, I have started to deal with sustainability in design innovation context. And then I moved to, out of everywhere else possible, I moved to New Zealand, and I did my PhD in sustainability science because I really wanted to understand what sustainability was and is, and etc. And I didn't want to do my PhD in a design school for that reason. Then I moved to Melbourne for 3 years between 2013 and 16, and did postdoctoral work there. And since 2016, I'm based in Helsinki, Finland. I'm very happy about that. So my research is pretty practice-based, practice-informed, and practice-informing. and it's kind of, you know, residing at the intersections of multiple areas with a whole diversity of, you know, theoretical dimensions, but essentially at the core, I use design and innovation research and sustainability science and transitions research and future studies in my work. And I'm also a professionally trained group facilitator and a foresight practitioner. So this is one of those slides where I think there's no need to explain what you are seeing here in this audience. But obviously now what we are focusing on these days is to mitigate, to adapt, and to ensure justice. And increasingly interspecies justice, which we are very interested in my research group, and also in design. That's kind of in design and planning. It's quite interesting emerging research there. So again, transitions and transformations, we all know they're structural, long-term, radical changes in socio-technical ecological systems. This might not be very familiar for you. So when I was doing my PhD, of course, Netherlands was quite kind of the leading, you know, Netherlands, Frank Gilles and etc. We're talking about between 2006 and 10. So just like when Gilles finished his doctoral work, etc. So Netherlands was at the kind of center of transitions work. And I did review quite a lot of that work, and also the work that influenced that work, such as sustainable technology development project, also, you know, all of the theories that informed thinking of Gilles, but also because I was in sustainability science, I learned a lot about complex adaptive systems, etc. So essentially my mind was a very confused, but quite, you know, confused soup of very interesting materials. But when I was doing this research in earlier times, I was quite concerned at a gut level, not necessarily at a very intellectual level at the time, at a gut level that the work was very technology centric and also technologically optimistic, as you know, West in general is, and there was more interest in creating change in the world by engineers than by social scientists. And because I'm kind of familiar with two worlds, I just didn't really, I didn't find this technocentrism, techno-optimism very convincing of all of the theories, that, transition theories that were coming out at the time. And particularly for me, the lack of normative futures dimension in Gilles's work was quite problematic, meaning whenever I looked at transition scholars at that time, it was all policy definitions that they were striving towards. But then sustainability is not necessarily, you know, policy definition is not necessarily meeting the change requirements for sustainable futures. So I was also very critical. I was learning quite a lot from transitions theories and work, but I was also very critical. And eventually I theorized, this is during my postdoctoral work, that sustainable transitions are not solely technological challenges, but they are threefold design challenges. So these three folds are creative. So of course we need to conceive entirely new systems, and that's a hugely creative challenge, with a lot of course, you know, analytical work required for that, but it's in its essence, it's a creative challenge. And then the whole kind of process of, you know, evaluating new system concepts somehow in order to get a sense of which of those system concepts are actually promising, and then, you know, designing and developing, deploying those new systems. It's a highly technical challenge. And when I say technical, I don't necessarily mean technological, but technical. So, you know, there's something quite technical in law, for example. I can make policy recommendations, but I cannot make law for new mobility systems. So in that sense, it's very technical, also including, of course, technology related technical. And then the third dimension, or the third fold, is political. So participatory and democratic processes of deliberation is not only, I guess, politically correct, so that we do it or we need to do it, but it's also, you know, needed given the kind of the scale of change that's needed. There is a requirement for mobilizing quite diverse groups of stakeholders, and I mean, of course, this is in the Western context, and this is kind of following the democratic process ideal. But the third fold of sustainable transformations is that there are political design challenges. And I also theorize that across all of these three kind of folds or dimensions, design research and design practice had potential contributions. This is our kind of recent book that it came out in 2020. And in this book, we looked at the history of design for sustainability and the tools and methods that emerged over many years. And we developed this levels of innovation framework. Well, I guess because both Fabrizio and I, we have been exposed to the multi-level thinking in transitions. But then again, I think this is a really nice framework, both for design researchers, innovation researchers, but also for transitions and transformations researchers who are interested in you know, design and innovation dimensions in transitions and transformation processes. But we identified 6 levels. And so the kind of the earliest work in design for sustainability was mostly, you know, replacing components and also replacing materials in products, and very isolated thinking about issues. And this goes all the way back to 1980s. And then we saw over many years, as of course, as the world has changed, and as design in itself, regardless of sustainability dimension, also changed from a kind of technology push profession or design profession or discipline to a human needs centric profession and discipline. We have seen in design for sustainability or to emergence of expanding perspectives, a lot of systemic emphasis, and my PhD was kind of, I think it was the first globally, but 3 PhDs came quite close to one another. Fabrizio's was another. We kind of combined design and innovation with sustainable transitions very early, 2010s essentially. And now there are many researchers, you know, researching at the intersections, which is amazing to see. But this looks like a linear kind of model. I mean, it visually it's a very linear model. It kind of, in a way, assumes or implies that socio-technical system, for example, level innovations is superior than material and components level innovations, but of course it's not. What this is trying to communicate is that before making material and component related interventions, we need to think at the systemic level. And what does that mean? You know, thinking at the systemic level and then feeding it back to the lower levels of innovation. So historically and still, design and innovation research as well as policy focus is on low-hanging fruits, which I call as sustainability as usual these days, because now everybody is doing sustainability. But for like the past 30, 40 years, whatever was done at the in the industry particularly was done because of industry standards, legislation, supply chain related issues, vulnerabilities, etc. And we actually have quite a lot of know-how already at these levels. And then, I mean, you know, for example, now EU is pushing this circular economy. Circular economy as in closing the loops. And I don't think circular economy should be that simple, but it's being presented and policies are being made without challenging the economic system underlying our production consumption systems. That's why I think, you know, it's like in its essence, in policy, it's closing the loops. It had been around for 30, 40 years, including technological know-how on how to do that. So I'm getting increasingly, I think, agitated because we're still, you know, more and more organizations are coming on board, but they start with this, like sustainability as usual. On the other hand, we really need to fast move our systems and change them, and I think research and action should really be channeled towards real life change. There's urgency, and at the higher levels of innovation, we stop being, you know, material and component and tangible, and we are dealing with new imaginaries, policy foresight, lots of experimentation, and also imagining and putting in place new partnerships and new collaboration models. So this is beyond sustainability as usual innovation, because very, very, very limited work is happening across these levels, particularly in industry. Cities, comparably much more. So I'm getting, you know, increasingly more agitated because we're still kind of in a constant mode of reinventing the wheel, which was invented, and not only one time, many times over the past decades. So how can we move actually, you know, towards these upper levels? My message is that we have to, of course, you know, with material, working at material or tangible level is a given we are biological material entities existing in a very material world. But that level, those levels of kind of hard, you know, material component product levels need to happen or need to be thought through with references to the higher levels of innovation. So we should first come up with new imaginaries, and then we should think about, okay, what kind of new material paradigms could actually work in the context of those new imaginaries. So I am proposing a reversal of these orders, in the sense that actually we first create the systemic visions and then we come and think about the materiality, which also, of course, requires a much longer term thinking attitude, which is also very rare in industry, but also among professional designers. Anyhow, so that's what I was trying to explain just before. Now, moving quickly in my remaining time to talk about roles of design in transition processes. So between 2016, I was in Melbourne, University of Melbourne at the Victorian Eco-Innovation Lab as a postdoctoral researcher and collaborating in this kind of quite large consortium funded by the Low Carbon Cooperative Research Centre, collaborating with two other universities, Swinburne and University of New South Wales, on a project that aimed to develop vision, scenarios and pathways for low carbon resilient futures in Australian cities. This was a design, engagement and action research project. And we had partners from private sector, and also we had partners from local and state governments. We did not have federal government as our partner because 3 months after this project started, Australia elected Tony Abbott as their prime minister. If anyone doesn't know who Tony Abbott is climate denier. So our ties with the federal government was immediately cut off. But we are happy and lucky that the funds were not cut off. And also, just to say that in 2013, focus on cities for climate action was emergent and not as kind of given as it is today, that we are, very heavily working on urban transitions. So in that sense, also, this project was new. So our methodologies, or our overall methodology, was design-led. All of our methods were participatory. Our methodology was very iterative, and it had creative, analytical, and integrative components. And this project was a truly transdisciplinary project in both non-academic partners being knowledge co-creation partners, but also them kind of, to a certain extent setting our research agenda and therefore influencing our methodological choices. Here you see a very, very kind of tamed version of an incredibly messier process. But just to give you an idea on the different kind of, key components of activity we had in the project, of course, desktop research, and that kind of goes in, in waves to indicate at certain times we did a lot of desktop research and at certain times we did not do a lot of desktop research, but it was ongoing on a lot of different topics, including theories relating to, systemic change, but also research, more in-depth research into specific niche technologies or social practices or business models that we thought could be assisting with, transitions to low carbon futures. So they were kind of, investigated a little bit in depth. And then we had, to start with, we had visioning workshops in Melbourne and Sydney. These were participatory. I think more than 130 people participated in them. And we had professional designers commissioned also for these workshops. And they were, the commissioned designers were table facilitators, knowledge harvesters, at tables, which were kind of quite rigorously composed, curated by us. We thought quite a lot about who sits with whom, because we really wanted to generate systemic visions of urban transitions rather than visions of specific provisional systems. So, energy or mobility. We really wanted the visions to be systemic. So we really put a lot of thinking into the workshop process design. But anyhow, then After these visioning workshops, we have, as we researchers of the project and the commission designers, we got into a room for a week-long design charrette or design workshop, and we kind of try to make sense of our desktop research and visioning workshops findings, and you know, a lot of synthesis work in that week, and designers generating more than hundreds visualizations of moments, critical moments from the envisioned futures, which we call glimpses of the future. Some of these were videos, some of these were images, but none of them were blueprints. And also purposefully, styles are very different because we were not trying to tell anyone that this is how the future is going to be like. It was more like, you know, these are the ideas that come into mind looking at the seeds that are emerging at the moment. And we had lots and lots of both formal and also informal stakeholder conversations using these glimpses as prompts to identify both, you know, from their relevant expertise, to identify, you know, what kind of technologies, products, or the kind of technological dimensions are understood to be feasible, because there are a lot of non-academic experts among that stakeholder group. But also in those conversations, we try to understand the points of contention among the stakeholder groups in regards to what is sustainable, desirable future in Australian cities. And then we developed prototype scenarios. Initially, I think these were like 7 or 8 prototypes, but a lot of consolidation work happened. And eventually we took 4 scenario prototypes to another participatory workshop and asked our participants to do 2 things for us. One, to put flesh and bone to the scenario prototypes, and also to kind of challenge the internal logic of each scenario, because they needed to be consistent internally and very diverse externally. And after that, we released, and after some analysis, of course, after that workshop, we released 4, scenarios. So I'm just going to quickly talk about the points of contention we identified as a result of those visualization prompted stakeholder conversations. As you can see, there are multiple points of contention, and we have tried to take into account all of these different points of contention in development of our scenario prototypes, and then eventually in the scenarios, or the 4 scenarios, as best as we could, kind of represent those points of contentions and how they could manifest in futures. So in this slide, each column is representing a different scenario, and the keywords at the bottom can kind of give you an idea on the very, you know, basics of each scenario. And the rows represent generic urban density levels and how each scenario would manifest, you know, at those density levels. These are visualizations. They're actually incredibly high res. And then they have associated scenario texts explaining in detail how these futures work. And I'm going to show two more kind of slides about these scenarios, and then I will wrap up with the roles design played. So each of these scenarios fall across, fall on a different part of the spectrum of where can the emission reductions, come from. So on one extreme end, radical increase of efficiency, on the other extreme end, radical reduction of consumption. And these are kind of also conflicting positions, scholarly positions, political positions. So then these scenarios fall across that spectrum. And when you look at, this spectrum, and they were also quantified, not by me, but another researcher, we got a chance to kind of, discuss at the time, I think, in a certain level of detail, the kind of pros and cons of, each scenario, rather than holding, very strong positions on, we can achieve by increasing efficiencies, or we have to reduce consumption radically. Essentially, none of the options, are silver bullet, but these discussions, these deliberations are and have to be part of these processes. And then this shows how the scenarios fall across governance versus values, value system represented in the scenarios. As you can see on the top, the two scenarios are top-down governance, and then on the left, for example, as opposed to on the right, the two scenarios are meritocratic. But this is a quite interesting additional look to this emission reduction. Spectrum. And then we also looked at who are creating these futures now. So these are the stakeholder groups in society, different stakeholder groups that are, in a way, promoting these different futures. And this is really important because eventually these people need to really negotiate, and rather than kind of constantly clashing and no, this is the way, no, that is the way. They really need to be around tables and negotiate their perspectives if we want to accelerate transitions. And finally, and I'm finishing in 2 minutes, I use this whole project also. I'm having done multiple different research, duties in that project. As a design researcher, I also used the project during I was part of the project to look at, okay, what roles design has played. So you may be familiar with this kind of, with this model by Dirk Loorbach. He talked about the 3 types of activities needed in transition processes. So these are strategic, operational, and tactical. I used this, and then I mapped the roles I identified during the project played by design onto these activities by way of analyzing multiple data sources. But what I found was only 2 of these roles are traditionally attributed to designers or design profession. And then the rest are emerging roles, and also roles kind of shared by multiple other professionals or professions. And then the other important thing is that design actually can play roles across all of these 3 different types of activities. And this has informed our curriculum in Aalto. And I also know that in other schools they looked at, because this is from a paper that I published in 2017. So design schools have been looking at this in order to rethink their curriculum in the context of 21st century. But that's pretty much it. And I am happy to hear any questions, comments, any challenges to my thinking from you clever early career researchers.